Hey everybody, welcome back to In Bed with a Millennial. I'm the Millennial Javeda Bay, and this is my bed. And it is still September, which means it's still back to school time for a lot of us. And I am still focusing on talking to college students because y'all need this information. Like, why not set y'all up for success in all areas of life and not just in the academic one? And today I want to talk about communication and sex in the college setting because I'm not gonna say that it's like different, like to some degree, it is different. But there are just some things that if you know about them ahead of time, you can be prepared for them. And we know that that's what I'm here for. I want you to be prepared for your college experience. So let's get into it. Javay, what do you mean by communication and sex in college? I'm so happy that you asked. I mean that when it comes to the college setting, like one, most people that are there, especially entering, generally have just left high school, where we all know communication is a completely different ball game. And so communication is very important in all the areas, not even just in like the sexual realm, but also like how you communicate with your professors, how you communicate with your roommates. Like communication is very important. And when I am talking about communication in relation to sex in the college setting, that is extremely important because, as I said previously, like 2 weeks ago, sex is cultural, meaning that language changes as we talk about things. So if you already are struggling with your communication skills, adding in the extra layer of like cultural differences around sex is going to make that communication even more difficult. So it's important to understand yourself as a communicator and also understand like how communication happens in sexual situations. And so for a lot of folks, the big thing I want is one to like let you like start thinking about developing your communication skills. And you're probably like, but I'm such a great communicator. Like me and my best friends from high school like talk all the time. Yes, and just because you have high frequency of conversation and communication with somebody does not mean that y'all are actually communicating effectively and clearly with each other. And what I mean by that is you could say a lot of stuff to your best friend, but are you saying the things that you actually want to say? Are you communicating clearly? Are you communicating about your feelings and emotions? Those are the communication skills that I'm talking about. And so you are going to want to develop those communication skills early on in your college career, because if you don't, it's just going to make things a lot more difficult because you are in this like prime time, especially if you happen to live on campus, or like have roommates. Like communication is so important, and so much conflict that arises in like living situations in college is because people lack communication skills. And I'm saying that from personal experience. Like a lot of stuff probably could have been avoided had I been actually communicating more clearly and more openly, honestly, and directly with people in my like college life. But I didn't. C'est la vie. And so when I'm talking about developing your communication skills, one, I mean, I need you to like actually get comfortable saying things, like say the things that you want to say, not the things you think people want you to say. We're going to like people pleasing does not really go well with good communication skills. Okay. But also in that developing your communication skills, I specifically want you to develop your communication skills, one, around boundaries, because they are important in college and life, but especially when it comes to like your sexual life. And then I also want you to get comfortable with communicating about sex. I mean, talking about sex things. Last week's episode, obviously, I brought up the conversation of consent and safer sex practices. That's all communication. You have to have skills to do that. And when it comes to your sexual life, you got to be able to communicate with partners like, hey, actually, this isn't really exactly what I thought it was going to be. Like, I'm really not into this anymore. I would like to stop. Or, hey, could you do this instead? Because that's not really providing me any pleasure. Those are communication skills that you're going to need and will make a world of a difference. Trust me, as someone who did not have these communication skills and then went off to college and became sexually active, the amount of bad sexual experiences I had probably would have been lessened had I actually spoke up and said like, hey, what you're doing is not actually doing it right, or whatever it might have been. So developing your communication skills around sexuality topics as well as boundaries is going to be so beneficial for your time in college or university. Another reason that I encourage folks to develop communication skills is because when you actually understand communication and get better with it, you are less avoidant of conflict. And you might be like, Jay, what does that have to do with sex in college? A lot, a lot, a lot. One, because your sex life and being in a shared living space, depending if you and your roommate or roommates have not talked about it, it's going to create conflict. So if you are someone that naturally just like avoids conflict and is like, yeah, it's gonna go away, I don't have to worry about it, it's time to grow out of that, because that is not the case anymore. In a shared living situation, you are going to have conflict. Unless you are living with somebody that you have lived with your entire life, y'all gonna have some conflict. And even when it is somebody you've lived with your entire life, there will still be conflict. So you got to get good at it. Do not avoid conflict in your living situation, but also with potential partners, future partners, however you want to like address them. But like when it comes to partners, conflict arises. You thought that, oh, well, we're gonna go and do this fun activity on campus together, and it turns out that they meant that they was gonna go with their roommates. And you're just like, oh, well, my feelings are hurt, but I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna avoid this situation. It'll just like blow over. That is a slippery slope. That is the start of a downward descent, because if you aren't verbalizing how things are making you feel and just like letting them go, they eventually start to build up on top of each other, and then you have a big blow up. And all of it could have been avoided with clear communication that wasn't avoiding conflict. So if you are someone that is a little bit like, I don't really want to talk about conflict, I need you to work through that ASAP Rocky, because it's not going to work in a college setting. It's not going to go well because you're just going to run into it. There's going to be so much conflict. College is literally a melting pot of so many people from different backgrounds, different lived experiences, and different points of view. So there will be conflict. And if you're going to avoid it for the entirety of your college career, it's not going to be pretty. So start working through whatever makes you conflict avoidant. Unpack that so that way you can actually develop your communication skills around conflict. And if you're like, Jade, how do I do that? Start with just some reflection. Like, I want you to like think back to times where like conflict may have arisen, be it with like your friends in high school or your partner, or even like siblings and parents and like family. Like, pay attention to like though, like think back to those instances, and then think about like what you could have done differently to address the conflict like earlier, rather than just like either letting it like blow over or letting it get to a point of you blowing up. So like take some time and really like reflect back on what it is that like how you've previously handled conflict, so that way you can see your own like trends in your behavior and you can adjust as needed. Now, the last piece that I'm going to talk about when it comes to communication and sex in the college setting is going to be over communication. And a lot of people like don't like this word. They think that like, oh my gosh, or you're just like doing too much, or like you're just like repeating yourself. And that's not what I mean by over communicate. I mean that you are giving the information that needs to be given up front and not making it a piece by piece thing. So like a great example is like when you and your best friend are trying to make plans, right? And you're like, cool, so we're going to go and do this thing together on Thursday night. Awesome. And that's where y'all leave the conversation right there. And then Thursday night rolls around and you're kind of like, oh, am I meeting them there? Or are they meeting me here? Like, what's going on? Like, over communicate in the sense of like, say all the pertinent information when you're having the conversation. Don't just like trail off and be like, oh yeah, I'll tell them about that later. No, especially not when it comes to sex, because if you're like, oh, okay, cool, well, yeah, then I will just see you on Friday in my dorm room, and like, yeah, I'll just see you then. And you leave out all those like pertinent details, like who's being responsible for like safer sex practices of like barrier methods, like have you communicated with your roommate that someone's coming over, like all of those details that like are important to know and know how they're going to be handled should be talked about ahead of time rather than in the moment that they happen. And yes, there are some instances where you cannot plan ahead and you're like, I don't know what could go wrong in this situation, so how would I know how to communicate that information? I'm not saying that, but if you already know, like, hey, I want to do this thing with this person and I want to do it in my room where I feel comfortable, great. One, where's your room? Let them know that pertinent information. Two, talk with your roommate. Let them know, like, hey, this is what I got planned happening on this day. I would love it if I could just like have the dorm room to myself for XYZ amount of time. Over communicate the information so that way there's never any like crossed wires and you're staring at your roommate walking in as you are climbing on top of someone. Okay, so just like over communicate, and also ask for clarification. That is a big thing with communication that I think a lot of people struggle with. We're afraid to ask questions, and I get it. We have been raised in a society and educational settings that like, you know, the whole phrase like don't ask stupid questions, like we've been like conditioned to think that like asking questions mean like puts us at fault in some way. And that's not the case. Asking questions provides clarification. And if you want to be sure of what you're doing and like how you and somebody are interacting, you have to get clarifying information. So that means you have to ask questions. So you're asking the questions like, oh, okay, well, do you already have some external condoms or a barrier method for us to use, or should I go ahead and procure some? Like, ask the questions. It's going to make your life so much easier. And then y'all two won't be staring at each other in your dorm room being like, I thought you was gonna. If you would have talked about it, you would just have what you needed, and no one would have thought the other person was going to do the thing. So yeah, develop your communication skills. It's extremely important, both in like the sexual realm, but also just in like setting boundaries. And if you're like, I don't even know how to go about setting boundaries, you know, I got a video for that, so like go and watch it. But make sure that you are developing your communication skills. Make sure you're also not being conflict avoidant. It don't serve nobody. It does not serve any purpose to avoid conflict. Also, because conflict doesn't mean you're in a fight. And I think that's also why so many people avoid it. Like, it has this like rep of being like, oh my gosh, there's conflict, which means like we're in a fight. No, it's not. We're just not aligning on something, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's to the level of being like screaming match. But like you and I just aren't agreeing on like whatever it might be. Like, there's conflict around the fact I'm like, I didn't want you to be in the room when I had my date coming over and you showed up, and so now we have to have a conversation about this after my date leaves. Like, not necessarily a fight. It could grow into that, but the conflict itself is not inherently like, oh my goodness. So work on conflict avoidance if that is something that you struggle with, because you're gonna experience conflict. That is the truth of college. I don't know what to tell you. And also over communicate and ask for clarification. Asking questions is not bad. That's what college is for. You're there to learn. So like, ask questions to learn more information when you need it. And over communicate instead of just like dragging out the disbursement of details. Like, give all the pertinent information up front. Okay. So yeah, that's that. If you are like, you're right, Jve, I do need to work on my communication skills around like boundaries, but also like the sexual realm. I don't know how to start that conversation though. Well, luckily for you, I created a little guide with some like conversation starters that are predominantly about consent, but you could tweak them to like start conversations that you're a little bit more avoidant to in general. So make your way on over to themillennialsexpert.com so that way you can download it. It is completely free. And yeah, definitely do that. But also make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, because why would you not want free, comprehensive, inclusive, accessible sex education that is pleasure focused? Why would you not want that? I thought so. And definitely make sure you're following me on all my social media platforms, because I share different content on everything. And why would you not want to get all the information that you could? And lastly, make sure you subscribe to my email newsletter, because everybody there finds out everything first. Like if I'm doing anything fun or, you know, stuff like that. And if you are someone that is interested in just like academic content, I have a separate newsletter that is all about my PhD journey. If that is something that you are interested in, you can also subscribe to that one. But basically, moral of the story, connect with me on everything, because why would you want to not be? Okay, I'm so much fun. I hope that your academic term, semester, whatever system you're on, is off to a good start, or if you're still preparing for it, it's going to be an amazing time. And until then, I'm going to see y'all later. Deuces.